everyone. So we are back with our second session on Let's Talk Neuro. We are going to talk more about the preventive care for few neurological disorders and learn more about them. We have with us Dr. Amit Kumar Pandey, who is a leading neurologist and consultant from Pune. He has been practicing for over 13 years now, and his clinical expertise is more towards neuromuscular disorders, aneurysms, interventional neurology, and many more. Hi, doctor. Welcome.
Hi. Yeah, nice to be back.
Absolutely, same here. So, as we spoke in the last neuro session, we are trying to educate people more and more about the different kind of illnesses and disorders that can affect their daily lives and even the lifespan that they are moving towards. And we are trying to bridge the gap between information and care for all our listeners. So, quickly jumping in to the first question, patients are now opting for an online medical consultation for certain conditions like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, neuropathy, and various movement disorders. So, roughly, doctor, what kind of diagnosis and medications can actually be suggested online for such chronic disorders? Because it's not possible to actually give them a multifold diagnosis, I assume, unless they are in person. So, what do you suggest for this?
Whatever conditions have been mentioned in this slide, like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, neuropathy, these are all chronic conditions. So
Correct.
chronic conditions give you a lot of time to gauge the symptoms, the disability, and so you can take little time and deciding. Little time means you can take 24 hours, 48 hours to decide what kind of diagnosis, what kind of investigations you want for your diagnosis. For example, in
Correct.
multiple sclerosis, because it affects everything, the eyes, the
Correct.
spinal cord,
Correct.
your sensations. So
Mhm.
you want a MRI of the entire neuraxis. So you
Mhm.
want the brain as well as the eyes as well as the spine to be screened. So advising a MRI for um, multiple sclerosis goes a long way in achieving the diagnosis. Of
Mhm.
course, the history is very typical. You
Mhm.
also need certain investigations which can be done only when the patient is indoor in an inpatient,
Correct.
like a cerebrospinal fluid examination to assess whether it is actually multiple sclerosis or he has got some infection or it is some disease which is presenting as multiple sclerosis, a mimic.
Correct.
So that is why on online consultation, if you're seeing a patient of multiple sclerosis, hopefully he should be a diagnosed one.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you will have to do entire gamut of tests like a MRI, a cerebrospinal fluid, visual evoked potential, blood investigations to reach to a proper diagnosis in
Right.
connection with the history. If
Right.
it is Parkinson's disease, the diagnosis is mainly clinical.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
MRI may not be you know a sure short diagnostic investigation. MRI
Correct.
of the brain would not help in diagnosing as patient with Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease do have a myriad symptoms. The most
Right.
common being slowness, which is we call in neurological terms as bradykinesia.
Mhm.
People
Mhm.
experience that people have started acting slow. They are slow in
Mhm.
day-to-day activities. They can't move fast. They
Mhm.
have tremors. The a relative notices that the hand
Mhm.
has been shaking when the patient is resting.
Mhm.
The patient may have falls, postural imbalance, walking difficulties. He's stooped.
Mhm.
So a lot of clinical features, play a role in diagnosing Parkinson's disease rather than diagnosing them on investigations. So
Correct.
both
Correct.
conditions are different. One requires imaging as well as investigations. The other requires clinical examination in thorough. So yes, this is how it goes.
Correct. So, also, doctor, once I guess when someone has been already given a diagnosis on this, a lot of people do go for second opinion. And what do you
Yes,
think is the scope in this? Like, does a second opinion really help in such situations?
it does. It does because Parkinsonian syndrome is a condition in which there are multiple. Parkinson's has got multiple subset. So suppose subsets may involve a progressive supranuclear palsy or a multisystem. So all these conditions, Parkinsonian umbrella, have got different ways of management. Some drugs may work in one condition, some may not. Some may require some additional treatment. So after eliciting a proper history, this is possible. Otherwise, if you just look at the symptomatology and start him on a blanket treatment, it may suit one, it may not suit the other. In cases of multiple sclerosis, it is very important to choose a drug, a drug with which the patient is comfortable with, according to his age as well. What happens in multiple sclerosis is you never know is when the next attack will come. So you need to start treatment within first 2 weeks of treatment. So initially you have to decide what the patient is comfortable with, whether he's affording for the treatment or not. Previously, drug therapy for multiple sclerosis was extremely costly.
Exactly.
Now it has become very cost effective. In our times, when a drug cost about 90,000, costed about 90,000 per month, now it has come to 18,000 per month. And a lot of oral medications have now become available for treatment of multiple sclerosis. All these treatments in multiple sclerosis are not foolproof, but they decrease the relapse rate. We have to understand that when we start a treatment, it is not going to let the disease go away completely.
Absolutely.
So it will only control the frequency of relapses, and you may have decreased incidence of relapses and thereby decreased morbidity. So this is how it works. So even in Parkinson's, we give drugs to control the symptoms. The disease never goes away. It is going to remain in his brain, in his body forever.
Correct. Interesting, facts on this. Even I wasn't aware that right now the treatment options that you said, even I was reading that they're very expensive and people often think twice before actually opting for them in certain stages.
Yeah.
So interesting to know this.
India is one of the cheapest markets for these drugs. Some drugs cost in about, say, lakhs of dollars outside India per year. In India, it is very cheap. It is nearly about lakh rupees per month. Lakh rupees, and there is lakhs of dollars.
Wow.
It makes a lot of difference.
It's a huge difference.
Huge difference.
Right. Yes. So I think we'd move on to our next question. How getting a second opinion for tumors can be life altering, because we've been having a lot of cases where people often ask us, that we've been diagnosed with tumors, and it's generally a surgery that has been recommended by most doctors because alternate treatment options is not something people generally go for in the beginning. But I feel through experience also, doctor, you'll agree on this, that as you said, that second opinion there is no one size fits all solution. We understand that, but can you share something about your experience with a case where a tumor was actually had a better cure solution than a surgery because of the second opinion?
I will give you two sides of this. Sometimes patients are diagnosed as a condition totally different. Sometimes they are diagnosed to be suffering from a stroke and have been told that this is not going to increase, it is going to remain the same. But what the radiologists see is only the image. They don't see the clinical scenario. So it is very important to correlate clinical as well as radiological. So you may help diagnosing patients better for tumors if you take both entities in context. Secondly, I have had many experiences in which treatment of tumors have altered the morbidity and mortality status of the patients. So there was a patient who had come with complaints of a seizure, and he had a mass in his brain, and he was advised surgery, and it was the right thing to do. The patients did not want to go ahead with a surgery. But everyone should understand that surgery here means, first of all, you need to know what kind of tissue is causing the tumor. So if you know what kind of tissue is causing a tumor, then you can plan treatment or no treatment. For example, if you have got a low-grade tumor, there are better outcomes with a low-grade tumor. So you at least know diagnostically whether the tumor is going to be responsive to treatment. It helps in characterization of the tumor. If it is a high-grade tumor, then your treatment options remain limited. But in a particular case, when we did a biopsy of a patient who had a tumor, it turned out to be a lymphoma. Now, lymphomas are very sensitive to chemotherapy as well as radiation, and it can cure the patient completely in most of the cases, or their morbidity improves and their 5-year survival rate improves to greater than 70%. So in this way, by diagnosing tumors with the help of operative, Getting the histopathology of the tumors will uh, help you in properly guiding your patients for treatment.
Right, right. I think
And
also, yeah.
most of the times the tumors also turn out to be benign. People only
Correct.
see the size of the tumor, for example, in cases of meningiomas, which are nothing but benign tumors of the brain covering, the dura. So these tumors can be removed easily. So they don't cause severe morbidity, and they are not recurrent to a great extent. Even if they are recurrent, they don't recur so fast. And once you remove these tumors, the patient can have completely normal life. So a patient who was diagnosed as a case of Parkinson's disease had a big meningioma, was operated completely, and all her Parkinsonian features vanished completely. So yes,
Interesting.
so you need to know whether the tumor is malignant or benign. So that is why treatment options involve, first of all, knowing what type of tumor you have. So that helps in properly channeling you through a proper line of treatment.
Right.
You know?
Right. Okay, so I think we will move to our next question. Now, we've also had a lot of reading on spinal surgery, which is I can say this from my own experience. My father also he's already had two spinal surgeries, one with disc herniation and one with a slip disc. Um, it becomes very overwhelming for patients, who come across spinal cord disorders. Um, what would you suggest in terms of making a decision for choosing a certain treatment path for these disorders? Because these are not something that can be cured overnight, and neither they can be cured in like a one go.
Yep.
So what do you recommend, doctor?
Now, spinal surgeries for the compression of a nerve root. If the patient is having deficit or intractable pain, is definitely advised, because if there is weakness, the weakness may only increase. And by giving medicines, this disc is not going to return back to its original place. So you need to stabilize your spine, and then comes the role of a spinal surgery. So if you want the disc to be remain where it is, or you want to shift it to its previously anatomical position, or you want to stabilize the spine to prevent further damage, you need to think about spinal surgery. We advise spinal surgeries for root problems, or the nerve problems, nerve compression problems, only when the patient has continued intractable pains, or he's developing a deficit, or has got a sensory loss. Spinal surgery is done in mostly in these cases. Secondly, if you have got tumors in the spinal canal, then these patients can undergo spinal surgery with limited benefit, depending upon what nerves are involved, where is the tumor,
Correct.
and so on and so forth. Spinal surgeries are extremely daunting because people fear that they may not be able to walk
Right.
forever
Right.
after that. So that is the
Right.
biggest hindrance. But with technological advances and improved microsurgeries and endoscopic surgeries, I think this is now being taken care of.
Correct.
People have to understand one very simple thing. They expect everything to return back to normalcy as previously, as they were born, which is not possible.
Correct. Correct.
Spinal surgeries are not advised to correct the anatomy. It is mainly advised to decrease the symptoms and prevent progression. So when you have got this in your mind, you are rest assured that you can go ahead and get the surgery done, because you can't experience the pain forever.
Correct. Correct. Right. I
So
absolutely agree. I mean, as I said, I've had this as a personal experience as well from, and it's kind of like an expectation ki, yes, will I be able to walk? Will my, movements be restricted?
yes,
Especially with slip disc and spondylitis, which is a very common issue that we see.
yes.
People often get very scared. Ki, okay, now what? What do I do?
I often see patients who come back after spinal surgery and said, Sahib, ye weakness has remained the same as it was previously. So then and there I point out to them, but it is not increased as compared to previously,
Exactly.
and that's what we
Exactly.
wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
So if you would have become bedridden, that would have been far worse than what
Worse.
it is today. So
Correct.
you need to you need to take everything with a pinch of salt, but you need
Correct.
to understand as a patient as well what is important, what has been done, and what is your expectations.
Right. Right. I think we are moving on to our almost our second last question. Can you share your experience regarding your cases associated with general chronic neurological disorders that you feel should never be ignored? Because once you,
Yes.
there are certain conditions which a lot of people ignore, but there could be severe implications of that ahead.
Definitely. There are cases in every category. For
Mhm.
example, a patient with stroke who has
Mhm.
been started on some blood thinners.
Mhm.
Many a times they feel that the doctor had advised it for 3 months, but he had also suggested a follow up, which they didn't take. And so they stopped the medicine. The blood thinners
Mhm.
were stopped. And so they land up with a new stroke.
Oh God.
Similar with patients with hypertension. They
Hmm.
think hypertension is nothing but increased tension in the brain, which is absolutely wrong.
Hmm.
Hypertension doesn't mean that you're taking more tension. Hypertension
Correct.
literally means that your blood vessels are working, they're thick enough, rigid enough, and they resist passage of blood more, and that
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
known as hypertension. So they also stop these medicines, and then they land up with a new bleed or a new stroke. So you don't need to change your medicines until and unless your doctor advises them.
Correct.
Similar in cases of epilepsy,
Hmm.
people feel they had a seizure, the doctor gave them a medicine, and now they didn't have a seizure for 3 months, and so they are all right, they are cured of this illness.
Hmm. That's
And
a
so
big
they
mistake
feel
to
we will stop
assume.
this. And many a times we have seen these patients to
Mhm.
come with a flurry of seizures, so much so that they'll end up in status epilepticus, which is a condition in which you have seizures and don't you are not awake even after 5 minutes. So this is a
Mhm.
life threatening condition because your brain continues to fire
Mhm.
inadvertently, and you need to give a lot of medicines and also need to put him on a ventilator so that his airway and everything is protected. So simple mistakes on the part of
Mhm.
patient of not taking medicines, not following up
Mhm.
in chronic conditions cause a
Mhm.
lot of problem to patients.
Correct.
Uh, this is the acute scenario. In chronic cases, for example, in Parkinson's disease or in dementia,
Mhm.
if we take dementia, uh, the patients themselves are under a lot of stress, and they sometimes don't know what is going on. They totally forget what is going on, who is who. They don't even recognize their relatives. So rather than the patient, there is a lot of caregiver burden. The patient who,
Correct.
the person who is taking care of this
Correct.
patient.
Correct.
So this is often neglected in the society, and we need to understand that you always
Mhm.
any patient of dementia who's accompanied by his relative, you always need to appreciate the role of that caregiver, that relative, because he's been taking care of an absolutely big baby, which is very
Right.
difficult to manage.
Right.
And congratulating them for the excellent care they are given is a small step which we as doctors can do in
Correct.
appreciating their services towards their relative. In cases of Parkinson's, these people tend to become depressed. So they
Correct.
need to be always agile, work at home,
Mhm.
involve in small talks, have social interaction, do
Mhm.
yoga, meditation, and exercises.
Mhm.
And these all things help a great deal in keeping the morale up, not thinking too much about the disease. So
Correct.
yes,
Correct.
these chronic conditions, yes, they are going to stay for your life, and you need to abide by whatever rules have been set by the disease, by your doctors, and follow up with them regularly.
Correct. Correct. And I think in general also with if we see the stats, if more than 30 million people are suffering, that means we are going wrong somewhere. There's some corrective path that needs to be taken for these disorders. Um,
Yes.
I think that
Yes.
speaks for itself. So coming to our last question, how should a patient deal with the myriad symptoms that are that accompany some of the neurological diseases? Now there's a lot of talk on you lose strength, you lose balance and sleep. There are back problems, and similar. So what do you suggest on a day-to-day basis? How should a patient deal with it?
We have to take a very important point in consideration. All patients who are suffering from chronic diseases at some point of time feel depressed.
Right.
And when they are depressed, they lose the zeal. They
Mm,
are not sleeping well, they are not eating well, they are not exercising well, they are not talking well. And yeah, their morale is generally down. So
correct.
these patients have to always be egged up to do things. They have to be stimulated, but sometimes it should not be done overboard. every time, morning, evening, if you keep on nagging these patients to do the things, they will get irritated and stop talking with you.
Correct.
So you have to be modulating yourself so much so that they listen to you, but are not angry with you. And these patients themselves should be always keeping their morale high. They should be listening to spiritual talks. As I said previously, relaxation methods like yoga and meditation help, and interacting with their peer group, which is the most important thing at any stage of life. Peer recognition and peer group is the most important thing with which you can discuss about day-to-day things as well as disabilities. Go a long way in keeping the patients happy.
Correct. I think acknowledging an issue is very important, which patients miss out on, and that's why they're scared to talk about it.
Definitely.
Because
patients mainly they come and think that I have never been ill for the rest of my life. I have never smoked. I have never taken alcohol. Still, all these diseases and conditions have affected me. And why is this so? And what have I done wrong? This is not your doing. It is just the genes, or it is just your body which has aged early, or you have to accept it, acknowledge it, and move forward that you're still able to talk.
Correct. Doctor, since you touched a point on the genes, just out of curiosity, so how much of a percentage does gene play in neurological diseases in terms of hereditary conditions that can be carried forward?
Yeah, many of these conditions are genetic, but when the conditions are genetic, they tend to occur in earlier life. So if your father is having certain disorder, or a parent is having certain disorder, and if he's transmitting a gene to you, so you will see symptoms in earlier part of your life, that is before 35, 40, 50. It would not happen at the age of 70, 75. Some conditions do happen, but it is pretty rare. So genetic conditions tend to occur earlier in your life stage as compared to later. And when it is genetic, then you know that it is in each gene, each cell of your body. And so you can do not much to control the disease, because it is eventually going to be there. And I'm afraid, but none of the genetic therapies have helped a lot, or the research has not gone up too much to help us in treating these conditions. So people always run behind stem cell therapy and all, but I would personally advise them against it, because it is not a proven therapy and you should not do it.
Right. Great. Thanks so much, Doctor. I think we have come to the end of our session, and this was really great. We are going to reach out to you again for another quick session soon. And thanks to our listeners also. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. My pleasure.